welcome, and good to see your faces. Good to see everybody. We're sort of the second week of the course, so we're nearing the halfway point, which is exciting. There was a little bit of a confusion at the beginning of last week's office hour where I was under the impression that it was the introduction week, and then I later discovered there is no introductory week because I guess the format of the course and preparing the materials had me think that there would be an extra week somewhere in there. Anyway, um, welcome. Uh, Once again, I'm just going to be answering questions. This will be available asynchronously afterwards on a video on demand. And if nobody has any particular questions, or if anyone has a topic that they would like me to just spout words on, I'm perfectly happy to just talk at length as well on any particular topic. So with that, welcome. So if there aren't any questions, I guess specifically. Oh yeah. Hey, Christoph, you're muted.
Hi.
Sorry. Hi.
Yeah, I posted something in the questions to the instructor. Hope I wasn't being too rude. I felt like after we had this introductory thing and the first week, which was very, more on a metaphorical
Mm-hmm.
level, just talking about AI in general. Then we got thrown into very cold water now, and that uh, I mean, I watched the video and I saw you do all these, copy all these command lines into the program and doing the stuff, and it had to replicate it. It didn't work at some point. So I felt like I don't quite understand yet what we're actually doing, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we're supposed to parrot some things that you are doing, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know which part of all these things does what, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt that could have used some more elaboration, maybe.
Sure. Perfectly reasonable, honestly. I think a part of my there are a few things I think to unpack there. So with regard to using language models in a more to actually using language models as opposed to discussing them metaphorically, the current approach to integrating them both into the newsroom and to make use of your data with them and to do pretty much anything in the machine learning sphere, it's we're standing on the shoulders of giants here in the sense that this stack has become really complicated, quite large. Python abstracts away significant amounts of work that have been done over the years. PyTorch, NumPy, different libraries that implement language models, but we don't get to see them. And then also just working with files, embedding. Embedding is a whole another story because whenever we embed a file, we're kind of using a language model whose head has been cut off, so to speak. Um, all of that is to say, there's quite a bit of information here, and I am indeed throwing you into cold water immediately into the deep end because, in a way, it's not necessarily intended to be a thorough illustration of how to work with language models so much as to illustrate what it's like to work with language models and to have a notebook that you can press and go on several times to get something that does hopefully work. So the I do distribute the notebooks that I write with every week and the reading materials. And the point of that is not to replicate what I'm doing, but more so just to press go and get a sense of what's happening, what it looks like when you're working with language models, what the input is, what the output looks like. And then hopefully you can take that information and think about whether you would want to work with language models, or maybe that changes your sense of policy making or implementing them in the newsroom or requesting certain things when someone is trying to present a language model product to you. So I guess, yeah, it's a lot of information to go through. And to be pretty frank, I'm allotted about 50 minutes a week of curriculum to produce, and we're told not to go over this. And for if I'm only producing a 15-minute video once per week, I don't think anybody would expect anyone to
Yeah,
have a
I
cold
totally see
start
that.
from like programming to work with Python, to install Jupyter Labs, to have a language model, be to download a language model, to run it on your computer, to do all of these things. It's quite an ask. honestly.
I totally see that. So
Yeah.
it's more like, last week, Thanksgiving, I was with my mother-in-law, who's
Oh yeah.
82, and working, telling her things to do on the computer.
Hmm.
And I felt like that when I when I listened to your stuff, that it's on the level of just telling someone you have to do this and you have to do that, but without getting any deeper understanding of what we're actually doing. And it's on a basic level, like this Jupyter Lab. What does the software do? What
Okay.
is the notebook? Where does this stuff get saved? Can I pick it up where I left? Where do I have my data in the end? So on a very practical level, I feel like I don't know where I am and what I'm doing. That's a problem.
That's fair. Um, yeah, that's fair. I'm not sure. I don't know if they uploaded it, but I did produce a video for the introductory week going through um Jupyter Lab and demonstrating it. And I'm not
I'll have
sure
to
if they
look
put
at
that
that.
up. So I'm going to take a look at it. But so I can also do a quick run through right now, which I think would be helpful for you. So let's open up Jupyter Lab. Dum-dum-dum-dum. Yeah. So in essence, all Jupyter Lab is it's similar to, oh, Felipa, I need permission to share my screen. Okay. I can't share my screen. But anyway, so Jupyter Lab is it saves data where you point it. Okay, I'm a co-host, so I can save it. Okay. So Jupyter Lab is an environment that lets you run Python code. It lets you type in commands like this and then run them if you, well, I hit control return, but you can press the little button up here as well. And when you run code like that, it goes off into the ether. It doesn't exactly go anywhere. If you want to save, if you want to load, you do everything inside what's called a Python notebook. It's a file. It's a text file actually, and I think the default save directory is just in your home folder. Whether if you're on a Mac, that's if you go to your username. If you're on a Windows, I'm not sure where it would save exactly, but regardless, it's your home folder, which tends to be the first folder that you see when you open up something like File Explorer or Finder. And a Python notebook is an implementation of something we call literate programming. So the idea behind a Python notebook is that you can intermix Python expressions like this together with text. And then the text is intended to illustrate or to explain what's happening in the Python expression. And the reason I use this in this class is that you could save the Python notebook, you can load the Python notebook, and within the Python notebook, it will take care of your Python environment. It will download all the dependencies. So if your code depends on um, a language model, it will download the language model for you. If your code depends on sentence transformers, which is what we're using for embeddings, it will download and prepare that for you, and it will keep everything tightly compact in like one environment. And that environment is just Jupyter Lab. So it's a very self-contained Python environment for just writing Python code and explaining it, and then sharing your scripts that you make with other people so that they can download your script, your notebook, and take a look at it. Python notebooks are popular in data science. They come up in situations where you want to have reproducible research. So whatever I write in the Python notebook, those cells will continue to be there. And if anybody goes through my notebook and presses play, 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 they'll get the exact same output, hopefully, that I do when I ran the notebook. And you can also save your output. So we have some people entering the call. And we're getting some messages in the chat. So Sharon is suggesting that I upload the notebooks to Colab and share it with people. Yeah, so I did share. If you are familiar with Google Colab, so first of all, if you are familiar with Google Colab, it's totally okay to just load up these Python notebooks in Colab. You do need to do a number of things if you want to have your language model be running on the GPU. So Colab makes a distinction between accelerating your code with a CPU or a GPU. And generally speaking, you want your code to be running on the GPU if you're running a language model, because these things are so large. The GPU is a graphics processing unit. It accelerates monitors and it runs games, but it can also run language models and speed them up. So, yep, the notebook also works in VS Code. So the reason why I'm having the class use JupyterLab over VS Code or Google Colab is, first of all, you can't assume that something will necessarily work in Google Colab. I've found it to be an incredibly finicky product, but also you can't necessarily run this in VS Code if you don't have Python installed, which might be the case for a large number of people in the class. Jupyter Nolab will prompt you to install Python. That's first of all, that's the number one reason why we're using this is at least on Mac OS, you can download the image file, you can download the .app, jupyterlab.app, drag it over into your applications, double click on it. It will prompt you to install Python. It will prompt you to load a notebook, and which I provide the notebooks, you can load them up. And it will be all in one place. This is where you can work with language models. That being said, Sharon, you do raise a good point. Google Colab might be easier for people who have a Google account, but I don't think we can necessarily assume that. Although it might seem like most people do, Google Colab is, I'm not necessarily certain if it's available in every single country. So that's one consideration. But anyway, so JupyterLab lets you run Python code. And let's see if I can go find my code that I wrote for the class. So let's go find it. Okay, so week number 2. Okay, so I'm going to share a new screen. Okay. So now I've loaded up, I've clicked on the IPy notebook that I downloaded. So if you double click, I think JupyterLab on Mac and Windows will register itself as the default application. So you can double click on the notebook, it'll open it up for you. And you'll be presented with some code. And this is code that I wrote up. I wrote in real time in the video, but you can access the code along with explanations asynchronously. And the first thing that it'll have you do is, I got rid of that, is you'll install LangChain. And then it will move your cursor, so to speak, down to the second cell. And then you can simply press go again, and it'll install PyPDF. Admitting more people into the call. And then it'll load up the PyPDF loader. And if you're having issues at this step, it might be because more people are entering. It might be because it's installing an older version of LangChain, which I hope isn't the case. I've tried updating that. And then we can load up the PDF by clicking go, 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 go. And it isn't necessarily important for you to understand what precisely is happening in the Python code. I've written some explanations explaining what we're doing at each individual step. It's more important to get a sense of what is happening in terms of the simplicity of it all. So these are quite short statements that we're writing. We're pointing it at our files using a file path. We're running simple commands, and everything is kind of being done for us. And that's thanks to Python abstracting away large bits of machinery, so large tracks of Python code. It's abstracting away the CSV loading, and we don't see any of the libraries that are being loaded when we do that. It's abstracting away the PDF loading and the splitting and the chunking. It's abstracting away so many steps. And what you end up getting with Python is a very simple, oh, here's a CSV loader function. We just pass it the file path here, and then it will load up the CSV, and we can access the CSV like so. And we can see that it's a series. Every single row is something has been turned into something called a document. And a document is what the language model will see. So when we are asking Mistral questions later on in the 3rd and 4th week, it will be looking at our CSV split up by row by row by row, like so. And it will be able to answer questions from there on out. But anyway, when you do download the Jupyter Notebook, this is what I'm expecting you to do, is you just press go, you press go, you press go, you press go, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll get a pretty decent output that illustrates what embedding files looks like, or what it looks like to work with a large set of data, because you don't only necessarily need to pass it this PDF, you could pass it a folder full of PDFs, and then all of a sudden you're giving the model access to a large and significant amount of information that is just resting on your computer somewhere. And hopefully the language model is able to answer questions about it. Yeah, so I'll turn over to the chat now to answer some more questions. So okay, so the PDF loader is not really loading twice over. I'm gonna go take a look at the actual, let's see here. I'm gonna open up the model, the module, the second week, and get a sense of, let's see. Okay. Okay. So Christoph, yes.
Yeah, that was my question. When I did this PDF loader thing, nothing happened, and then when I tried to load the document, it said doesn't know what PDF loader is, right?
Okay, so I can try doing that myself here. So first we'll install, we upgrade pip just to make sure that we're getting the
That
latest
worked.
version of the dependencies. That should work. And then when you go to the second
And I
step
did
here,
this, yeah, this
it
command.
breaks. Nothing happens?
Yeah.
Does it have an error code when you do it?
No, so we're talking about this line number 2 there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that one. Nothing happened, and then for the next one, first we have to give the right path to that folder, right? Where we don't
Yeah,
upload
but by
the
default it should be correct already, because the Python notebook is in the same
Okay,
folder
yeah.
as this data folder.
Yeah, I had put it somewhere else. So, but
Uh,
yeah, it said basically it said it doesn't know what pipe PDF loader is, so it obviously hadn't imported it.
but on this line, if you see a number 2 appear beside the line of code and there's no error code, it should be loading successfully.
Okay. I'll
Because if you
try
don't,
again.
like if you load something that doesn't exist, for example, it'll give you an error.
Okay.
So, and errors in general are red blocks. If anybody runs into these things, please feel free to take a screenshot of it and just throw it up on the instructors section of the forum.
Yeah.
So I can get a sense of what's wrong exactly. Um,
And so
but at the, yes.
since I'm talking already,
Yeah, please, no, go ahead.
since you so first of all, you only uploaded 2 single documents. In the end, we want to upload a lot more stuff, right? So we want to that's probably a different way to import things. I don't have to go one document by document.
Yeah,
And
that's I can try a resource for doing that, but that's going to involve another module that lets you take a look at folders specifically. So out of the box, Python is really only aware of files and not folders. But I think LangChain comes with a tool for loading up everything resting in a folder, and then you just point to that folder. You can drag and drop in documents, run it again, drag in more documents, run it again, etc.
that's what we're going to do next week, probably, right?
Well, I continue working with these 2 documents actually because but yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I'll account for that. Thanks for bringing that up to my attention. So Leonardo La Rosa. So I had to go to ChatGPT and solve the problem, but instead of the file path, it told me to add encoding UTF-8 after the file path. That is interesting. So that should be default. Leonardo, did it work after that?
Yeah, it worked. I
Interesting.
was surprised because I was trying to do a lot of stuff. I didn't actually finish the video because I was stuck there, you know?
I see. Uh, are you on Windows or Mac?
Yeah, right
Or
now I'm on Windows. I'm my at work, so yeah.
I see. Interesting. It should be defaulting to Unicode. And the fact that it isn't is kind of interesting and something that I didn't expect. And that's probably the fault of me only testing my code on Mac OS. So I'll just make a note of that, and I will share that with other people in my weekly message. So this week also, just as a side note for everybody, if you're interested, I am going to be uploading an interview with John Keefe, who works at the New York Times, but the interview time has been pushed back significantly for different reasons. And so towards the end of the week, you can look forward to that interview being uploaded. But anyway, so issues with loading the document. If you are running into issues, please post your specific problem on the instructors forum. I'll take a look, I'll answer you. And if there continue to be issues with a significant number of people, I'll probably make an additional video for next week going through different ways of loading up a document, because we might have to ditch this PyPDF thing if it's not working exactly. So thank you for bringing it up to my attention. Yes, thank you very much. So from David Ho, a difficult question when ready. Getting a little ahead of the course here, and I know toward the end we're going to be looking at hosting what we create on Hugging Face. Are we also going to explore what's involved with hosting what we create ourselves? So what we create locally, will there be any guidance? Is it an answer live button? Oh no. Okay. Right. So when I talk about hosting on Hugging Face, I think I should have been more specific. I do this. There's different ways of hosting with Cradio specifically. One way is the default to hosting it on Hugging Face's spaces, which is I think nominally public. But when you host your Gradio application, so we're going to be working with a library called Gradio, which is developed by Hugging Face. It was acquired by them 2 years ago. Gradio is a simple library kit for making very convenient user interfaces. So you can create your user interface with Gradio, you can plug your language model up to it, and it'll give you, like, say, a chat interface that looks like ChatGPT. Or if you're using an image generation model, it will let you easily, let me just get my screen here. So if you're using an image generation model, it'll let you have a simple user interface for generating images and passing in prompts, getting back images, and so on. Gradio is really neat, not only because it's simple to set up, but also because it is it comes with both a server on its own, and it also plugs into Hugging Face. So if you choose, you can choose to have your Gradio application hosted on Hugging Face, but you can also host it on your own machine, and it will give you a publicly accessible URL that someone can plug into their browser and load up your model over the internet. So it lets you host it on your own website, for example. So if you're running a news organization and you would like to host your machine learning application for funsies and let other people access it, Gradio can handle the hosting for you. I don't think it's production ready, just because Python libraries really rarely come with production ready HTTP servers, but Gradio, I think, has something decent. So as I'll demonstrate in the 4th week, I default not to making your application public, but rather private, in the sense that you have to share the URL with people. So with Sharon, I think the default encoding might be different for different language locales. Oh yeah, you know what? That's probably true. Yes, that is probably true. So, on Mac at least, I would assume, so Python under the hood uses Unicode. Like, I don't think there's any ASCII encoding happening, but it might be that Python on Windows on certain locales default to certain, like, non-UTF-8 encodings. So yeah, that might be a language issue, something that I should have anticipated. So thank you very much for the tip regarding the encoding for the PDFs. I'll make a note of that, and actually I'll probably push that out in the weekly message. Okay, that's a lot of information coming all from different directions. So I think, firstly, I should apologize for the video being both as short as it is and as abrupt as it is in introducing Jupyter Lab. Christoph, thank you very much for that. Sharon, thanks very much for your tips as well. I'll share the notebooks on Google Colab and throw that link around as well. The nice thing about Google Colab is that it's a single environment that shouldn't be influenced by your system locale. So if it works on Google Colab, it should work for everybody. So we'll do that as well. But that does assume that you have a Google account. And if you don't have a Google account, then things become a little bit trickier. And I think just for this course, we couldn't assume that people would have to create a Google account using a phone number, because that's assuming too much on our end. On the other hand, I think we're also assuming a little bit too much by having people download language models and run it on their own computer, because you do need a computer that's within 5 to 10 years old. I've run Mistral on a ThinkPad that dates from about 2014 and it's quite slow, but it does work. But anything past that, anything older than, say, like an Ivy League chip, is probably going to suffer when running a large language model. And also, it's assuming that people have lots of RAM. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I had a
Sure.
question. Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm a reporter for the Associated Press.
Mhm.
I'm getting an error when I try to install the Chroma DB. When I get to the step that's like uh let's see, pip install -u Chroma DB. I get this error which I posted in a comment. It's rather long, but um the first thing they suggested was upgrading pip, which I did. So I don't think that's the issue. And the second thing is the REST tool chain, and I'm not quite sure what to do in that case.
Oh my.
If it's a very complicated thing to answer, I can send you a I can just send you a message on the um, instructor's webpage and we can figure it out separately.
It's
This
not
is
a
going to be like a hard
complicated.
thing.
No, well, it's less of a hard thing and more of a, like a oh no, because I think many people will begin to run into that issue. Rust is quite large to install. It's a different programming language. It's a lower level programming language that's intended for running really performing code that runs quickly on your computer, performing programs that run quickly on your computer. And it's a bit of a pain to install. So the fact that it's assuming your environment has Rust is not great. And it might be a simple matter of telling it that Rust is not available, and then maybe it doesn't want to use it. But I do, in fact, have Rust installed on my computer because I develop. But I think most people using this will not, and I was sharing JupyterLab under the assumption that it wouldn't require it. So, okay, thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'll think of a way to get around that.
Okay, thank you.
It's kind of funny that this course could have used maybe some Q&A, but there's no system for that on the Knight Center side. Okay. So Christoph again.
Yeah, away from the command lines to the more general question.
Sure.
You haven't said much about use cases, like what we're going to use the whole stuff for. And I get the impression it's a little focused on newsrooms, but there might be other freelance guys like me in the course. So for a newsroom, the obvious application was to upload all their archive and articles and then query them and find information. Since I don't have that, but I have, for example, all my stuff that I've ever published on my hard disk. I could probably try something with that. Or the other thing is everything that I save all my research stuff as PDFs and tables and whatever. Could that be just dumped into a model and then I would have access to that information?
So have you used ChatGPT Pro before, the premium one you pay money for?
Yeah, I have it.
And have you used the data analysis feature, the code interpreter, I think they used to call it?
No.
So ChatGPT out of the box comes with this neat feature if you pay money, where if you give it a CSV file, the model has access to a Python environment where it's able to analyze your data for you and write up data analysis scripts in Python and run them and then give you back the output. And it's now possible to do that on your own. And it's out of the scope of this course. But if you're a freelancer and you would like to do something that's vaguely approaching data journalism work, so if you want to produce a data diary and produce, say, like a graph or something, and to take a look at large amounts of information statistically, and you're not exactly the most comfortable with Python, it's possible to have a model like Mistral, which we'll be looking at later, or ChatGPT do the data analysis for you, provided you bring the data. So if you are a freelancer, that is so at the Brown Institute of Columbia, I spent some time hanging around there, and that was one of the use cases we were looking at for freelancers in particular, and just for people who want to study raw first party evidence. So if you have a bunch of, say, documents downloaded from something like a city's open data service, and you have a bunch of CSV files, and you'd like to answer a specific question, which is like, I don't know, like if you make such and such an amount of money, what kind of benefits are you getting from the city under certain circumstances? And the data is right there, but you have to crunch the numbers and get a good hard look at it. And you don't want to spend a lot of time sitting in Excel writing formulae. It's possible to hand that data off to a model and have the model write the code for you and study the data results coming out of that script, and then deliver some sort of graph to you. That's probably the most immediately obvious use case, because we're very much still in the stage, the whole industry and everybody works with language models in a empirical, in a hard skills kind of fashion. We're still trying to get a sense of what these models are good for, because it's clear that they are capable of writing well-functioning programs. It's clear that they can look at a large number of documents and draw conclusions from them. It's clear that we can pass off certain skills to them and have them run workflows for us. But under what circumstances it's more efficient to, and under what circumstances we can trust their output, it's not clear. Especially because hallucinations continue to be a major issue with these models. Can you really trust data analysis work coming out of these things? Maybe, maybe not. The benefit with using ChatGPT over other approaches is it's a little bit like a Python notebook, in the sense that it will describe to you what it will do, and then it gives you the script, and then it gives you the output. So you can verify on your own that the program is doing what it's supposed to do. Now, if you don't understand programming, if you don't know a programming language, if you don't know Python in particular, then it might be difficult to come to notice when the model is doing something it shouldn't be, and it's running into issues that it should not be. And whether that impacts your investigation becomes a real question. And so any workflow implementing generative technologies at this point is very, very cursory, in the sense that we want to get a sense of what is possible and what it looks like to work with these models, but whether they'll be in a production ready state at any point in the next few months is really another question besides. And so when one talks about possible use cases, it's always hypothetical. And you can come up with potential areas where they will be really helpful. You can look at this and that use case and look at potential problems and then try to mitigate those problems and then come up with a prototype. But I've really yet to see any major generative technology not go past beyond the prototype stage. And that's for a number of reasons. Well, first of all, hallucinations. Second of all, these models are not yet intelligent enough to really understand the subtext of our questions at times. And third of all, just today, for example, there was another paper released. It's been floating around on Hacker News. They grab about, I think, a couple terabytes of text, maybe 10 terabytes of text off the internet. And then they talk to ChatGPT, and they have all these examples of conversations with ChatGPT. And they look at all the conversations with ChatGPT, and they look at every single one of its responses, and they try to see if any part of that response has been pulled verbatim from their 10 terabytes of text scraped from the internet. And they're able to find, I think, roughly 100 gigabytes of overlap and 100 unique circumstances of overlap where the model clearly memorized its training material. And if that's the case, then you also have to be wary of copyright, and you also have to be wary of the model not necessarily understanding what you want in particular, but rather it is just supplementing its own response with evidence drawn from its training data that it might have memorized during the training process. So all of that really is to say is there's so many issues of using these models. And I think the benefit of a course like this is not only to create a space where people can begin to talk about these models to get a sense of what it's like to work with these models, but also to approach these questions and try to come up with a situation where using this model is actually a good thing as opposed to just a problematic use case fraught with vulnerabilities and a quite large attack surface. So yeah, I think that's about it. Embedding.
Can I use
So
can I
yeah,
use
for sure.
these models? Could I use the model? I throw all my articles at it and
Mhm.
ask it to learn my writing style, and then I don't know, I'll never have to write again. No, but can I teach it a certain style and ask it to write a paragraph in that style?
Yes, you can.
ChatGPT
Um,
offers, I think they offer a feature, but it's buggy and it doesn't. You can upload material, but it's very hard at digesting it. And as you said, we don't want to give them all our data, and rather do that myself.
well, you don't want them to train on your data. It's okay to pass the model in, pass data in when prompting. So when we use a language model on the computer, we know for certain that it won't be training on the information we give it. But like you said, if you, with online services, the same can't be said. So interestingly, uh, copying someone's writing style used to be more possible, but it's actually become less possible. And in fact, I've done some research at my university where we found that going from GPT-3 to GPT 3.5 to GPT-4 actually lowers its ability to mimic a writing style. And whether that's because the model, well, actually, no, we know the reason. The reason is because it's really desperately trying to mimic a very particular style of writing, and that's very AP English. It's very corporate. It's very safe. And so these models, they're not incentivized during the training process to be able to copy someone's writing. So even though it can read the way you write and it can pinpoint the specific way you write and it can pinpoint what makes your style, it still won't necessarily be able to do that unless you really push it with the prompt. Um, that is to say, and this is going to be a little bit past the pale here, but what you might want to look into is training a model. And I think there's let's see here. It won't be demonstrated in this course, but I would imagine. So if you want to get a model that if you like a program that makes it really simple to run a language model locally on your own computer, that is not Jupyter, that is not futzing around with Python code, LM Studio is becoming pretty interesting. So I just shared a link to that in the chat. I think they're planning on allowing training in their program. So what that would do is it means that you could take your data and then train a language model on your data a little bit so that it doesn't, with a little bit of data, language models are able to replicate your style of writing quite quickly. But it requires probably a GUI for that, and running in a Jupyter Lab notebook is not necessarily going to be the best way to get a sense of that. Let's see here. I'm finding a second. Okay. And then if you'd like to try training a language model on your own computer, and this is really only strictly for people that have significant rigs at home, and that's not a MacBook. I think you need a desktop with an NVIDIA GPU generally. This program, which I just shared, has a whole toolkit for training language models on small amounts of data. What we're doing in this class specifically is RAG, so retrieval assisted generation. Retrieval assisted generation is really this idea that the language model doesn't know everything, and you need to, and so to circumvent that and to circumvent hallucinations, you ground it in a certain data set. And that is the data set that we're providing it in PDFs and CSV files and text files and pretty much any other plain text format. But that doesn't necessarily impact how the model writes. So if you want that, then you need to train the model. And to do that, then you would like one of the programs I just linked to in the chat. But anyway, for everybody who's continuing to face issues, please feel free to contact me in the instructors section of the forum. I'll be able to answer your questions there. The midweek message will be going out soon. That will contain tips and tricks on how to get around your current issues. And next week, I'll supplement the curriculum with more content going through certain ways to get around, use text chunking and CSVs to split CSVs. I think the default CSV loader and LangChain splits it up row by row by row, which might not be preferable. I mean, you might want to column by column by column or something. But in general, I think row by row, assuming each row is a separate record, is probably the best practice.
But can you then get an answer? Like if you want to say, well, what is the largest, what is the city with the largest population in Canada? And you just have this thing in like a bunch of chunks. Can it actually like look at all the chunks and answer that? Or does it not do that? Do you know?
Great question. So I have issues with that of my own. Generally, I think there's a couple of ways to answer that question. The main way is you're going to hope that the embedding model is able to capture that in its embedding of the each chunk. So this is a big number, this is a smaller number. Generally, they do capture that in their embedding. But if you're finding that you want to actually have the language model compare numerical data, then it's probably better to either pass in the spreadsheet entirely or pass the spreadsheet into a Python environment and have the model use a library like pandas, which is for manipulating data frames or spreadsheets like an R. So yeah, that's a use case where chunking might not be the best approach.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Please feel free to ask me questions publicly, or you can also, I think, direct message me on the Night Center forum. So for everybody who is facing issues this week with the content, I apologize. I have a number of ways of getting around that, thanks to your suggestions in this call, and I'll go about implementing that as soon as possible. So anyway, thank you very much, everybody, and I hope you have a good week. This recording will be available after the fact. And as always, make sure you do participate in the discussion forum. Make sure you do take a look at the readings and everything else in order to successfully clear this week, so to speak. So anyway, goodbye and have a good week.